My son brought a brand new laptop to my retirement party and set it on the table in front of me like he was presenting a trophy. "Dad," he said, "you've been using that thing since 2009. It's embarrassing." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. It was a good moment, the kind you hold on to when you're 67 years old, and you've spent 31 years working the floor at a paper mill in western Pennsylvania, and your retirement party is being held in the back room of the same Italian restaurant where you took your wife on your first date. My daughter-in-law had hung a banner. My granddaughter, who just turned 9, was spinning in circles near the dessert table because she'd had too much fruit punch. It was exactly the kind of evening I'd been looking forward to for years. My son, I'll call him by what he's always been to me, which is my boy, my firstborn, the one I coached in Little League and drove to chess club every Thursday for 4 years even though I never understood the game. He sat beside me and showed me the laptop. It was a good one. Thin, fast, the kind of machine I wouldn't have known how to ask for. He'd already set it up, he said. Email, photos, everything transferred over. Even put your banking app on there, he told me, so you don't have to drive to the branch every time. I thanked him. I meant it. My wife Loretta had passed 26 months before that night. Breast cancer, diagnosed in October, gone by the following March. 5 months. People always say it happens so fast, and I always nod, because there's no other way to describe it. One season she was here and the next she wasn't, and the house still smelled like her shampoo for weeks after the funeral, and I didn't open the windows because I wasn't ready to lose that too. After she died, my son came around more, called more, stopped by on Sundays sometimes with his wife and my granddaughter. I was grateful. I told him so. Grief makes you appreciate the people who show up, and he showed up. I held on to that. I didn't know, at my retirement party, that I should have been paying closer attention to the laptop. I'm not a technology person, never have been. I used email at work because I had to, used my phone to call people because that's what phones are for, and I kept a paper calendar on the refrigerator door because I could see it from across the kitchen. Loretta handled the online banking. She was sharper with that kind of thing, always had been, and after she passed I figured out just enough to get by. Check my balance, pay the electric bill, nothing fancy. So when my son said he'd set everything up, I believed him. I didn't look too closely. The laptop sat on my kitchen table for the first week while I got used to the idea of it, and then I started using it the way he'd shown me. Email, photos of my granddaughter he'd send from his phone, the banking app, which I opened exactly once, saw a screen I didn't recognize, and closed again because I didn't want to accidentally do something wrong. It was my daughter who first noticed something was off. She lives about 40 minutes away, in Allentown. She's a registered nurse, has been for 20 years, sharp and no nonsense in the way that people who work 12-hour hospital shifts tend to become. She came to visit 3 weeks after my retirement party, a Saturday, brought lunch from a deli I like, and while I was in the kitchen she sat at the table and opened the laptop to look up something for a recipe. She went quiet. I came in from the kitchen and she was just sitting there, looking at the screen. Not reading, not scrolling, just looking. "Dad," she said, "come look at this. What is it? Just come look." I sat down beside her. On the screen was a window I'd never opened, some kind of settings panel, and she was pointing at something on the left side of the screen. A program name I didn't recognize. "I don't know what that is," I said. "I know you don't," she said. "I do." She's not in technology, either, but she's married to a man who works in IT security for a hospital network in the Philadelphia area. She'd heard enough over the years to recognize what she was looking at. She called her husband right there at my kitchen table, put him on speaker, and walked him through what she was seeing. He didn't say anything seconds after she described it. Then he said, "Don't close that window. Don't touch anything. I'm going to drive out there." He arrived 2 hours later, sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee he didn't drink, and spent 40 minutes going through the laptop while my daughter and I sat in the living room and said almost nothing to each other. When he came out, he sat down across from me and looked at me the way doctors look at you before they say something they've been rehearsing. "There's a piece of software on this machine," he said, "that gives someone remote access to everything on it. Your files, your keystrokes, meaning every password you type, your banking app, your email." He paused. "It was installed before the laptop was given to you, before the box was opened." I heard the words, I understood them individually. It took longer for them to arrange themselves into something I could hold. My son gave me that laptop, I said. He nodded slowly. I know. My daughter wanted to call the police that night. I asked her to wait. I don't know what I was waiting for, exactly. Some alternate explanation, maybe. Some reason that didn't mean what it seemed to mean. I sat in my living room after they left, and I thought about my boy as a kid, 7 years old, bringing me a card he'd made at school on Father's Day with crayon drawings of the two of us fishing, which we'd never actually done together, but which he'd apparently decided captured something true about our relationship. I thought about him at his wedding, the way he'd gotten choked up during his vows and laughed at himself for it. I thought about how much he looked like his mother. I didn't sleep. In the morning, I called my daughter and told her I needed a few more days. She didn't like it, but she gave them to me. During those days, I started paying attention in a way I hadn't before. I went back through 3 months of bank statements, printed them at the branch, sitting with the young woman at the desk who helped me figure out how to request them, and I looked at every line. My son had been named on my accounts as a secondary authorized user years ago, when Loretta was sick and we wanted someone to be able to handle things if something happened to either of us. It had seemed like practical thinking at the time. There were 17 withdrawals over the past 2 months that I didn't recognize, all under $1,000. All from ATMs in towns I'd never been to. $11,400. I set the papers down on my kitchen table and sat there for a long time. Then I called my daughter and told her I was ready. She was the one who thought about how to do it carefully. She'd talked to her husband, and he'd talked to a lawyer friend of his, and between the 3 of them they'd worked out something that I want to be honest about. I didn't fully understand all of it in real time. I was 67 years old and I was grieving in a way that retirement had quietly uncovered, and I was trying to hold together the fact that my son, my firstborn, had installed spyware on a birthday gift and stolen $11,000 from me while I was still wearing black to church. But I trusted my daughter. I always have. What she suggested was this: we leave the laptop exactly as it was. We don't close the program. Don't alert him that anything had been discovered. Her husband would monitor what was being accessed remotely, and I would call my son and tell him I was having trouble with the banking app, that I'd tried to look at something and it asked me for a password I didn't have, and could he come over and help me? You want to use yourself as bait, I said. I want him to come here and show us what he knows, she said, on record. She brought a voice recorder. Her husband had already documented the spyware with screenshots and a written report that her lawyer friend said would be admissible. All we needed was for my son to sit down at that laptop and either access the remote software or say something that placed him in connection with it. I called him on a Wednesday evening, told him I was having trouble. He said he'd come by Saturday morning. Those 3 days were the longest of my life since Loretta's last week in the hospital. I slept in intervals. I ate without tasting anything. I took walks around the neighborhood at times I wouldn't normally be outside, 6 in the morning, 9 at night, because I couldn't sit still, and I couldn't watch television, and I couldn't do anything that required me to be calm. My daughter called every morning. "You okay, Dad?" "No," I said each time. "Good," she said. "Don't pretend to be." He came on Saturday at 9:30. Knocked twice the way he always has. 2 quick knocks. Then the door opening because he knows I leave it unlocked during the day. He came into the kitchen where I was sitting with a cup of coffee and the laptop open on the table, and he looked exactly the same as he always does. That was the part I wasn't prepared for. I'd imagined he would look different somehow. Guilty. Altered. He just looked like my son. A little tired around the eyes, maybe the way he'd been for the past year or so, but my son. "Morning, Dad," he said. "How are you holding up?" "Getting by," I said. He poured himself a cup of coffee without asking, which he's always done and which I've always liked, and he sat down across from me and looked at the laptop. "So what's the problem?" "Banking app," I said. "Wanted to check something, and it asked for a password I don't remember setting." He turned the laptop toward himself and started typing. And I watched his hands. I don't know what I expected to feel in that moment. Rage, maybe, or some protective numbness. What I actually felt was a tiredness so deep it seemed to go past the physical, like something in me had been running at full speed for 3 days and had simply stopped. I watched his hands on the keyboard and I thought, I know what you're doing. I know what you've been doing. And you don't know that I know. He navigated through a couple of screens and then paused. Huh, he said. What? Weird. It's asking me to authenticate from a secondary device. He frowned at the screen. Let me try something. And then he opened the program, the one his brother-in-law had documented. He opened it the way you open something you've opened before, without hesitation, without having to look for it. I said very quietly, "What is that?" He looked up. Something shifted in his face, so fast that if I hadn't been watching for it, I would have missed it. Just a flicker. Then he said, "It's just a utility I installed so I could help you remotely. So I don't have to drive out here every time you have a question. How long has it been there?" "Since I set up the laptop. I told you I wanted to be able to help you." "You didn't tell me about that program," I said. "Dad, I didn't want to confuse you with—" "There's $11,000 missing from my accounts," I said. The kitchen was very quiet. My coffee had gone cold. Outside, someone 2 houses down was mowing their lawn, and the sound of it was oddly ordinary. My son didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "What? 11,400 statements, small withdrawals, all ATMs, all in places I've never been. The first one was 9 days after you gave me that laptop." Dad, his voice had changed, flatter. "You're confused. Let me look at." "I'm not confused," I said. "And before you say anything else, I want you to know that your brother-in-law spent 40 minutes with this laptop 2 weeks ago and wrote up everything he found. And your sister has been in the next room since 8:30 this morning." The back bedroom door opened, and my daughter walked into the kitchen. She stood by the counter and didn't say anything. She didn't need to. My son looked at her, then at me, then at the table. The mower outside cut out. In the silence, I could hear the refrigerator hum. "I needed the money, Dad," he said finally. His voice had gone very quiet. "The business? It's been bad for over a year. I owe people. I didn't know what else to do." "You could have asked me," I said. He didn't answer that. "You could have sat at this table and said, 'Dad, I'm in trouble.' I would have listened. I don't know what I could have done, but I would have listened." He put his face in his hands. My daughter stood very still by the counter. I thought about saying more, about the retirement party, about the banner his wife had hung, about how I'd told 3 different people that week what a good son I had. I thought about all of it, and then I decided not to say any of it, because I was too tired and because none of it was going to change what had already happened. "I need you to leave," I said. "My daughter is going to drive me to the police station this afternoon." He looked up. "Dad, I've already talked to a lawyer," I said. "Everything is documented. I'm not asking you anything. I'm telling you what's going to happen." He left. He didn't slam the door. That surprised me, somehow. He just pulled it shut behind him, quietly, the way you close a door in a house where someone is sleeping. I filed the report that afternoon. The detective who took my statement was a woman about my daughter's age, patient and precise, and she asked questions without making me feel foolish for not having noticed sooner. That helped. I didn't realize how much I'd been dreading being made to feel foolish until she didn't do it. The case moved in the way these things apparently move. Slowly, then all at once. The documentation my son-in-law had prepared turned out to be more useful than I'd understood at the time. The spyware was professionally traceable. The ATM withdrawals were on camera. My son had not been especially careful, which the detective told me was common. People who steal from family members often aren't, because they don't really believe they'll get caught. He was arrested 6 weeks after that Saturday morning. My daughter called me when it happened. I was sitting on the back porch, with a cup of coffee and the newspaper I still get delivered because I'm 67 years old, and some habits are worth keeping. "It's done," she said. "Okay," I said. "How are you feeling?" I thought about that for a moment. The yard was quiet. The maple Loretta had planted along the back fence was turning, just starting to go gold at the edges the way it does every October. "Tired," I said, "but clear." In the weeks that followed, I did a number of things I should have done sooner. I removed my son from all financial accounts. I called the bank and had new account numbers issued. I changed every password on every device, with my daughter sitting beside me and writing them down in a notebook she keeps in her kitchen drawer. I updated my will, which I'd been putting off since Loretta died because it felt like the last piece of paperwork connected to her, And now I was grateful to have the reason to finally sit down with the attorney and finish it. I also, and I want to say this plainly because I think it matters, I talked to someone. A grief counselor at the hospital where my daughter works was willing to see me. I went because my daughter suggested it, and because I'd run out of reasons not to. What I learned, over several weeks of sitting in a small office on Tuesday afternoons, is that grief and betrayal aren't entirely separate things. That losing Loretta had left a kind of opening in me that I'd filled with trust in my son, and that the trust had made me less careful than I should have been. Not because I was foolish, but because I was lonely, and I needed to believe that someone in my family was looking out for me. I'm not angry at myself for that. I was 67 and I'd just lost my wife, and my son showed up with a laptop and set it down on the table like he was handing me the future. I believed him because I wanted to. That's a human thing, not a failure. What I know now, that I wish I'd known then. Anyone can set up remote access software on a device before giving it to you, and you won't see it because it's designed to be invisible, and you won't think to look for it because it's your child. If someone gives you a new phone or laptop or tablet, anyone, family included, take it to a professional and ask them to check it before you use it for anything financial. It costs almost nothing, and it takes 20 minutes. Loretta would have done it without being told. I should have. My granddaughter turned 10 in November. I drove to Allentown for the party, sat at a table covered in purple streamers, ate a piece of chocolate cake that was too sweet in a way that was exactly right, and watched my granddaughter open presents with the absolute intensity of a child who has not yet learned to pretend she doesn't care about things. She came over and climbed up next to me at the table, still holding a stuffed rabbit she'd just unwrapped. "Grandpa," she said, "are you sad?" "A little," I said, "because she's 10 and she knows when something is true." "Is it because of Dad?" I looked at her. "A little," I said again. She leaned her head against my shoulder. She's still at the age where she does that without deciding to. Just does it because it seems right. "I'm glad you're here," she said. "Me too, sweetheart," I said. "Me too." There are people in your life who show up and people who don't. There are people who hand you something that looks like a gift and people who actually give you one. It took me 67 years and a laptop and a very long season of paying attention to learn to tell the difference clearly. I'm still learning. That's probably the most honest thing I can tell you. But I'm learning, and I'm here, and the maple in the backyard is already starting to bud again. And some mornings I sit on that back porch with my coffee and I think about Loretta, and about my daughter, and about my granddaughter with her rabbit. And I think there is still something worth protecting here. I intend to protect it.